Welcome to another episode of Inspired Voices, Motherhood Unfiltered edition. My name is Riera. It is the month of May. We're continuing the conversation of motherhood. Different topics released every single Friday for the month of May, talking about motherhood. If you see me wearing this shirt, it is because I am sponsored by Heart Warrior Legend. It's a family that goes around and supports heart awareness. So if you want to support the Heart Warrior Legend brand, I'll leave a link in the description below for you. This is actually a good time to say, if you have any comments or questions throughout this episode, leave them down below. We'll love to hear it. If you have any different perspectives, let us know what you think. All right, let's get into it. Today's topic is going to be about the generational parenting differences. We got the boomers, we got the Gen X's, we got the millennials, right? Those are the kind of generations right now that are parents. I think we're going into Gen Z right now. But, you know, that being said, the differences between generations. Of course, I have my guest here today, Tiffany. Ooh, my stomach is growling. Of course, I have my guest here today talking about motherhood, a therapist, a mother of three, Tiffany Williamson. Yes. Tiffany, good to have you back.
Yes, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the third week of Motherhood Unfiltered.
Yes,
unfiltered. Call it that. You know?
Yeah, I like that.
That's a good name for it. Just for, quick reference, for the people who don't know, can you tell a little bit about what you do?
Yes, I can. I am a licensed therapist. I'm also a pregnancy coach and corporate consultant. And I work with moms in all stages of the motherhood journey. Yeah. I'm very excited to be here with you today talking about Motherhood Unfiltered.
That's right. Yeah, I think this is you're very qualified for this, I feel like.
I try, because I'm also a mom too. Let me note that. I'm also a mom of three.
That with therapy is like
right, it's a double hitter. It's a double hitter.
For sure.
Yeah.
So as far as generational parenting, how is parenting today different from past generations?
I think there's a few reasons why parenting today is a little bit different. I mean, just keeping in mind that each parenting generation is going to feel like their generation parented different than the previous generation. And really that's thinking about the different things that are impacting kids nowadays. So of course, when we were growing up, there wasn't internet initially. Yeah. There wasn't social media. That all came around as we were getting up in age. But now we have kids that have that literally from day one.
What you just said kind of like made me realize that every single parent has to kind of learn how to parent a new way because of technology and all these things.
Yes. Yeah. Back, I remember growing up, it was like video games were like the things that parents were trying to parent against to make sure your kid didn't play too many video games and become violent. Where now you hear about bullying. You hear about social media and bullying and self-esteem issues coming from social media and likes and Instagram posts and all of that, which wasn't present.
Right.
During our generation of growing up. So keeping in mind all of the advances in technology, that has a great impact on how you would parent and also the things that we've learned from growing up as children and saying, okay, well, when I become a parent, I want to do this differently.
Oh, right.
So that also impacts how you parent as well. And as a generation, I will say the generation that is now raising kids, we're looking at how we were raised and saying, okay, so what can I do differently? How can I make sure my kids are more emotionally aware? Yeah. And we can do that now because also thinking just from a advancement standpoint, some of the concerns that maybe our parents had when raising us is making sure we get to school on time and getting a job, going to college, that was kind of the normal route. Whereas now we live in a world, there's many different routes to get to many different avenues in life. And we aren't as pressed to find that one job you're going to work in for your life for 30 years and do that. Now you have the ability and the time to think about the emotional well-being of your child. So that impacts how you parent.
Yeah, that's interesting because like do you feel like you have like good parts and bad parts when it comes to like past generation parenting and stuff like that?
I don't know if I would describe it as good parts and bad parts because I would say it all makes who we are today.
Okay, yeah.
And it makes who the people that are now parents, it's kind of our makeup But there's definitely things now as a mom myself, as a parent, where I'm like, okay, there's certain things I want to try to implement, you know.
Yeah.
There's this whole wave of gentle parenting, which the basis of it is parenting more so from a position of less do as I say, don't question me. It's more so making that room for a child to ask questions or kind of have more of an opinion, which depending on the age of your child can be difficult, depending on,
I guess, their maturity too.
Their
right?
maturity, their developmental state. So gentle parenting, I say, looks different for everybody, or it looks different based on the day, based on the situation.
Right.
Or I would say as a mom, sometimes it looks differently based on the hour. You may have tried to gentle parent at 9 a.m., but by 4 p.m., it may look a little different.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Right. I wonder if it's going to be easier or harder for the generational parents from now on, because, you know, boomers and, you know, they were the old world, right? Now we have the new world of technology and stuff like that, which we were the first of. And so we get to see those different sides.
Right.
And I feel like because we see different sides of it, maybe we're able to make the better decision.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah.
Or better than maybe, or maybe put it like this, we may have more options than what the generation above us was able to have when it came to parenting.
Yeah.
Because you think even just from a race population perspective, the older you get in generational parenting, the differences you had to raise your child just for safety. Whereas, you know, thinking about the Jim Crow era, thinking about the era that was just newly emancipated from slavery unto the Jim Crow era to even now, the era we're in now, when you're thinking about the different things that have happened, especially speaking to just the African American kids as well, while there's differences in how we have to parent, I will say as a mom, as a Black mom myself, there are still some things I'm keeping in mind just to parent my kids in a certain way just for safety that may be passed on from when I was a child, from when they were a child, that still remains.
Interesting. Do you keep in mind like what they still have to go through based on or what they don't have to go through now, that kind of thing?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
You'll always keep that in mind because, I mean, I have my own experiences where I'll see the lens of how I need to make sure I parent my kids, or what I may do differently, or the environments I may put them in differently to make sure they don't have the same experiences. But I think especially those that are considered minorities, there is a similar line of I want to make sure my kid is set up for success.
Yeah.
And regardless of all the great accomplishments and paths forward that we have went, you also have to acknowledge the world that we live in. And even though what's common and what's popular now and how the world is viewing, especially those of us that are not white, also keeping in mind that may not be how everyone sees you.
Yeah,
so
that's
you
true.
almost have to parent your kids in the safest way possible, just in case they do encounter someone that's also not as open-minded.
I feel like that's is that tough? Have you had those
It's
conversations
heavy.
yet?
It's a weight. It is something that we're starting to think about, especially because I am raising sons. How to integrate that, because kids, they don't see it, the world like
especially
that.
when it comes to race and stuff like that.
Absolutely. They don't see it like that. I mean, they may notice differences, but not in the way that we've now been indoctrinated to see differences. They just notice difference, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything to them. And you almost don't want to have to give them that meaning and understanding, because it kind of takes away their innocence a little bit. But from a safety perspective, you almost have to, and it's really our job as parents, especially those minority parents, to kind of lay that foundation, because it starts at home. They're not going to get that in the school. But there's certain things, especially raising boys, you have to kind of let them know how they're going to be seen in the world first, before someone gets to know them.
That's tough. I don't know.
I know. I didn't see it going
like,
this
how do
route.
you
I'm like,
I mean, neither,
I was
but
like, wait, we went over here, which is fine. But yes.
Yeah,
What do you think about?
No, that's I like.
Yeah.
It's an important conversation to have, because
It is.
people don't really talk about how we have
No.
to say that to our kids. You
Yeah.
know, like, hey, there's gonna be racist people coming after you. And like, how much do you say
Right.
Versus like
pull back and not give them, which ties into, it still ties into, this is something that remains within parenting generations, but you may do it a little differently. So before, it may have been life or death, where you're teaching this at home starting at a young age, and it's because, you know, there was segregation. So you can't go into a certain establishment. So you had to make sure your kids understood fully how to read the differences between a sign that said colored versus white, so they don't fall into an unsafe situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not there in that time, but you still need to help your kids understand unconscious bias and how that may impact them, and when to alert their parents who are a little bit more aware of, hey, this is a little bit weird, or no, this is a normal part of growing up. And I think that's where the parenting differences come through in generations, in that our cares and concerns look a little different because of the time that we're in.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm not worried about, for example, us going into certain establishments. I'm more worried about, okay, when my kids finally do get online or they get a phone, making sure we're talking about bullying, talking about self-esteem, also talking about the implications of sharing pictures and different things, and how serious that is. Because again, with their kids, young kids, even kids, I would say any age, they don't always understand the full implications of their actions. And you don't want, especially again, when you have kids that are of the minority, their consequences may look a little harsher.
Yeah.
And it's not because they deserved a harsher consequence, but it's just the nature of life. So you do want to kind of help them not have those consequences, so you don't even have to have those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, and then like you have the like, okay, is my son actually going to listen to me?
Oh,
and
yeah.
how hard, like you see those movies where like the father is like beating the kids because like, hey, that's going to happen. This is how serious it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And I think that's what the difference is in generations, where in the past, maybe it took more physical punishment, whereas I think we're coming into a generation now that still serious, still want the kid to understand the seriousness, but we're maybe having more of a conversation.
Yeah.
We're maybe sitting down at the table and really saying the whys. Because I think in a lot of the older generational parent, you didn't get, you were told to do something, but maybe you didn't get a full understanding as to why I'm being told.
Yeah.
You know, so then you're just like, well, why do I have to do that? You know, like, and so it doesn't stick. So then you constantly needed to be scolded or whatever so it to stick. Whereas I see a lot happening even in my own motherhood and working with other parents, we're doing a lot more explaining. We're kind of telling you, like, I'm telling you not to jump on the couch because I don't want you to break your neck.
Yeah.
And then we have to go to the hospital. Like, we're walking them through and helping their little brains kind of work through the decisions. So it's not just a, I said what I said, don't question me kind of thing. We're allowing the questions and kind of offering them that supporting evidence so it starts to click for them.
Yeah.
Of course, at their developmental level.
Right. And then you got that age where like they're constantly asking why.
Oh, of
why?
course, of
Right.
course. And it does get difficult. You begin to understand why your parents were like, because I said so.
Right.
It gets to be a lot sometimes. And
Right.
sometimes you don't have an answer for every little thing that you're directing them to. But I have noticed more, especially, I would say, care has been in, let me explain. Let me get on your level. Let me look you in the eye and understand, help you to understand why I'm saying it. And I would say another difference that's coming about a lot with this generation of parenting is apologies.
Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
sorry.
That's a big one.
It's a big one. And it's uncomfortable.
To say sorry?
To say sorry, even just in real life, just in general. People don't like to apologize. That's not always everyone's strong point, to just have to be like, oh, I'm sorry. I would say as someone grows older, it usually becomes easier. But
Yeah.
when you're having to go to your child and be like, you know what, yesterday I wasn't my best self, or mom didn't do as well yesterday. That's a little bit harder.
Why?
That takes a position of vulnerability that with a child you may not want to take, or acknowledge to your child, I'm human like you too.
Well, why?
Because sometimes you get so used to being in the parenting level that sometimes you forget to rehumanize yourself back to your child, because you've been the caretaker, you've been the authoritative figure, and sometimes you need to remind not only you but also the child, like, I'm human too, I make mistakes. And if you're not someone that would naturally acknowledge that anyway,
Yeah.
it's gonna be harder for you to do that with your child.
Gotcha.
But I have seen a lot more parents, and it's even something, you know, I do as well. Me and my husband,
Sure.
you'll hear us like, you know what, let's try that again. And it helps. There's a difference in that versus just not doing it to a child, and then 20 years later they're in therapy talking about not being apologized.
Right.
So.
Do you find yourself talking to other moms about how to navigate that, like how to actually apologize and stuff like that?
I wouldn't say that one is harder to navigate, I would say, in this generation, only because we're the generation that wasn't necessarily apologized to.
Yeah.
So we know how it felt to be like, well, I was owed an apology here. So I would say it's a little bit easier for us.
Okay.
But yes, we're always talking to other moms, like parenting. Because sometimes it's hard, and there's many books out there.
Sure.
But there's not a book specific to your child. So it's hard to know, okay, well, which parenting style may work for one child, may not work for another child. And you're having to balance back and forth while also still showing up for work, while also still doing all of your other responsibilities.
Yeah.
And a key point in that is in parenting, you also need to have alignment if you do have a partner or a spouse in the parenting style.
Yeah.
Because if there's a disconnect there, kids will play on that. So you have to also be in alignment as well, which can be difficult. If
You talking about like if one parent says no, but the other says yes, kind of thing?
I was even saying a little bit deeper than that. If one parent feels like a child or children should be parented X, so maybe they are more strict. Maybe they feel like all kids need to listen and learn and not speak. But then you have another parent that's like, no, I want to give them the opportunity to have opinions and things. That will change how you parent and even how you discipline.
Interesting.
Or how you receive when a child is upset.
Yeah. What's the best way to navigate that kind of thing? Because people are different.
People absolutely are different. They come from different homes. They were parented differently. I always recommend to those that are choosing to partner together, talk about it before you have kids.
Okay.
And if you can't talk about it before you have kids, let's talk about it during the pregnancy. Or if we haven't talked about it, then let's talk about it as soon as we can with the kids, because you that's one thing you have to be aligned on, because it will eventually cause division, because the kids will pick up on it as well. The mom will be known as X, dad will be known as X, and you'll then have to parent that division.
Yeah.
So.
And then I guess if you guys don't come to agreement, maybe an outside perspective, like a therapist.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. A family therapist would always be recommended. Especially, I see the biggest differences may come down to discipline and religion. Those are two things that I would say as a coupling, to be aligned on, because it's not up to the kid to decide either one of those. You have to have made that decision. So that's one of those major topics, like you should be talking about when we talk about relationships, because it matters.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So, like, what's one outdated parenting belief that, needs to go?
One outdated parenting belief. I mean, one outdated parenting belief would be to kind of talk at a child, but not actually explain to them. Because the thing is, what I've learned about children is that they want to understand. And if they understand, most of the time, it should help them in changing the actions that's causing you to say, hey, I need you to do this differently. So this belief that children can't understand or aren't willing to understand, or you don't need to offer them any sort of explanation, I don't think that's fair. Obviously, children are at a different developmental rate. They learn differently, but they're growing up and learning how to be a human. And if we want them to embody great qualities and to be good humans, we want them to also learn how to explain things to others and not just talk at them or just tell them what to do without giving them the choice and the option.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it's a little bit harder for immigrant parents as well when it comes to that kind of thing, because they're also in a new place trying to figure it out, while the kid is as well.
Yeah, that would make things harder, especially being in a new country that's completely different and trying to parent maybe according to your home country or the way they were raised, but that may not be in alignment with how things are here. Because I know, especially, I've talked with moms who that was a thing where I think in America we we try to be a lot more open in choices and things, but that doesn't always align with everyone's parenting style. Right. Not to say one is right and one is wrong, but that would be hard if your kids are going to school and they're learning X and then coming home and it's a completely different environment.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, how do I do this?
Right. Yeah. You know? That was me growing up. I was like, it's almost, I literally was like, I see two different things here.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? The separation was big, you know?
Yeah, so. And that's, I mean, it's almost why you learn to code switch, as we say, at a young age. And that's not just in speech, that's also in actions.
I didn't realize that, but that's
so
true.
It could be, I show up, your kid shows up differently at school than how they are at home. Because at school, they're nice and loving. But let's say at home, it's a more toxic, abusive environment. So they're showing up as two different people. So now kids are learning how to, like I said, code switch, depending on environment. Yeah. And so what you're saying, you were almost probably doing different actions based on your location. If you were at home, maybe you wouldn't speak up. Maybe you wouldn't kind of voice your opinion. Whereas at school, you kind of had the option to push back on a teacher, be like, I don't really want to do that. Whereas at home, you knew if you did that, that may have other consequences. So kids learn that very fast.
That's very interesting. How do you, I guess, you just got to compare the two between how your kid is and what the book says, right? And just kind of see if it works or not.
See
is
what
it
works.
A lot of trial and error?
I was just about to say, you trial and error a lot of things. Because like I said, when gentle parenting first came out, everybody was like, okay, I'm going to try it. And then there was a lot of people that was like, this don't really work for me. and you're immediately like, and that is okay. Right. We trial and error because again.
But should you think it doesn't work for me? And I mean, should you think it works for my kid, but not for me?
Ooh, could also be that.
Okay.
And thinking about if it's not working for you, that's some internal things that we did need to talk about that your parenting may be triggering, but not working for your child is really why you're trial and erroring.
Yeah.
And also recognizing each kid has their own personality. So what may work for kid one may not work for kid two, may not work for kid three. So now we're trying out 2 or 3 different things depending on the child you're talking to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, at the end of the day, we just want our kids to feel love. Yes. And do the best they can.
Yes, that's the key. Not end up in therapy.
Maybe not be clumsy, you know, and all that.
Kids gonna be clumsy. We just want them to
stay out of the
hospital, make smart decisions, and be loved.
Right. All right. Well, I appreciate you being on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That's the end of the 3rd episode of Motherhood Unfiltered. We have 2 more episodes to go this month of May. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you have any questions for Tiffany, leave them down below as well. Or you can reach out to her at
transformativedestiny.com, or my Instagram handle or social media handle is at transformativedestiny.
All right, cool. I thought you were going to finish that.
I was like, wait, that's it.
All right.